Hello, legendary listeners, and welcome to the newest episode of the Legendary Ladies podcast. Kat Morgan and I, as well as my cat, Octavia, if you're watching on YouTube, you'd be able to see her
She
joining
is
us.
she is a black cat, so it feels right for this episode.
And
It
she's
feels
not
right for
in
this
every
episode.
episode. She
No,
doesn't
she
show up
doesn't.
all
No,
the
she's
time.
not. Guest starring my cat, Octavia. So this week, we are excited to talk about the AMC Plus show Interview with the Vampire. So full titles, Anne Rice's The Interview with the Vampire. We talked about it because it's actually coming out on Netflix on August 19th, which is right about the time that we are going to be releasing this episode. So fortunately, if you're curious, you can actually find the first episode entirely on YouTube. So we watched the whole pilot. Thus, this is a spoiler-filled episode. So we're going to talk about our thoughts on the pilot. Some of us have gone in blind. Some of us had a little bit of experience with the interview with the vampire, not a
The
vampire.
not A.
The vampire.
I've made the mistake of saying A. It's not just a vampire, it's the vampire.
The vampire.
And there seems to be multiple vampires too. So
Yeah,
that's interesting.
It was why I was confused. I thought it was like, oh, just A, because there's multiple. But no, he thinks he's the
vampire.
The vampire.
I wonder if down the line, like that's the title of the article, Interview with the Vampire. And maybe it's the only one left at that point. You never know.
You know what's so funny? When I was watching the beginning of this pilot, I thought it was a commercial, and I was like,
Yes!
"Well, I gotta skip this guy."
I also thought that, and I'm
That was
like,
her masterclass.
I know. For clarity, I've seen this pilot. I watched about half of season 1, and never finished for no apparent reason. Sometimes I just don't finish things. It's a terrible habit. So I've seen this pilot like a year or two ago. So you would think that I wouldn't have also been surprised and thrown off, but I was like, oh man, is there another ad? No,
That's what I thought,
it was the
especially on
pilot.
YouTube. I thought
It's
the
hard
only
to
way
tell.
they post it for free, they must need this like promo of this guy. And then I skipped it. I was like, wait, this guy's here again? He's talking to someone. Wait, that guy who's just talking is not a commercial? Let me go back. But I knew nothing about the show. I really thought from what we saw in the next 20 minutes, it was a period piece. I thought that was going to be the show. It was like in the 1920s or whatever. So when we saw this like modern take, I was like, oh, because I never even thought about the title either of like, he's being interviewed. Got it. I've never seen the movie. I knew.
I was gonna say I wanted to kind of toss this. How familiar are you with? Is everybody with the source material? So like the book or the like the movie that came out in like the 90s with like Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise. Was it Tom Cruise?
I knew.
I feel like it was.
I know because
I think
the
it was.
internet apparently had thoughts.
Okay. I remember watching that movie back in the day and being like, this is so scandalous. But I was probably like 11 and shouldn't have been watching it. So who knows? But yeah, I've seen the movie, but I've never read the book. So I don't really, there are books actually. It's like a whole series.
There's a
I haven't read
lot
any
of
of
books. My friend Dan loves these books and is always telling me about them, but I guess I've never gotten anything from it because I just didn't know what this was about. Because he would always tell me like specific things, like this guy's doing this thing and they're vampires. So I never really thought about the basics of what the thing was about. But I know there's a lot of books. There's
a lot of books, and from my like sort of secondhand knowledge, I think the books get things get wacky. Like at some point, somebody is definitely like a rock and roll star or something. So I guess that's maybe a fun glimpse into the future of this show.
So for anyone who's curious, the first book was actually published in 1976. So Anne
Oh my
Rice,
God.
the author,
I had no idea it was that old.
Wow.
I didn't realize it was that far, anyway. So obviously the bits that they've worked into this pilot, about, like the pandemic and stuff, that's all stuff that they've put into this, which I thought was really interesting to have it set in modern day 2022.
I like that.
It was released.
Yeah, me too.
I liked that a lot. I thought that was really well done.
I like it, but really didn't
likes the
expect
modern
it.
day stuff.
I like the modern day stuff a lot. Once they got back to the other stuff, I was like, oh no, this is the show I thought it was gonna be.
Once we went back in time, Kat was like, damn it.
So let's dive in, but real fast, those of you who are listening on an audio stream, whether it's Stitcher or iTunes, thank you. Please tune in if you're interested on our YouTube. So you can actually see the YouTube recording of us recording this podcast. We have video. You can see the cat. It's a lot of fun. You can comment as well. We love the comments that we get. We actually got some comments on our most recent Batman YouTube video, which we will share later. But the best part is if you were a Patreon, you could join us live as we record these episodes. We're usually recording ahead of time now. Knock on wood, it stays that way. Now that I just said that, we're going to record like 6 of them late.
I
But
know.
if you are a Patreon patron, you can find us on patreon.com/thelegendaryladies. You can join in and watch these episodes live and early at a certain level and can actually get the opportunity to chat in while you watch.
And even if you can't make, whatever live recording time we have, they're posted right after that. So you're often going to get them like 4 or 5, maybe even a week early. So
yeah,
fun stuff.
So if you wanted to know our thoughts on Interview with the Vampire,
if you were on the edge of your seat waiting for what we thought.
So let's kind of dig in. So Kat, Morgan told us a bit of her history with the series. I went in completely blind. I didn't watch a trailer. All I knew is that it involved a vampire.
You got that much.
I would probably like it. I had no frame of reference, no time period, didn't watch a trailer, nothing. I just found it on YouTube because Kat said it was on YouTube. I had no concept other than the fact that I knew that it was popular enough to be at Comic-Con for 3 years in a row.
And that's
wow.
on Netflix.
What was your and that it's on Netflix. What's your experience, Kat?
Just that Phil, my business partner, he watched it with his fiance, and again, his brother watched it, and that's honestly the only frame of reference I had is that it existed. But other than that, the vampire show, I literally no other. I didn't even know it was an AMC show.
Yeah. Well, I was surprised what they managed to get away with showing on like just a public YouTube page.
Yeah,
like, oh,
that's true. I didn't actually think about it being on YouTube and
nudity.
A lot.
Yeah.
There's a whole sex scene in here. I didn't even think about the idea
is.
that it was published on YouTube and
yeah,
they got away with it. Yeah, I really didn't think about that.
Very curious. So let's kind of hop in. We're going to talk about, one of the things I want to talk about is the world building of this series, as well as the characters, the actual location, the time, the setting. Because I have some thoughts I want to talk about with that. Not necessarily good or bad. I'm really curious to talk about the setting and location. But let's go ahead and start with just your overall general thoughts. Morgan, we're going to start with you because you have had, you watched the most of it beyond just the pilot. But just talking about this first episode. And for those of you who are curious, it looks like they did actually release episodes 1 and 2 at a chunk back when it was released. So we're just talking about the first episode. But yeah.
It didn't feel that way though. It didn't feel like a
it did. No, it didn't. I mean, it has like a little bit of a dun 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 ending to the episode, but it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like half of an episode or anything like that.
Yeah,
I mean, it's his origins. Like, how did he become a vampire? That's episode 1.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So Morgan, share your overall thoughts.
Yeah, I liked the pilot. I thought it was really good. I liked the way that they sort of set up the storytelling. I like so having seen the original movie of Interview with the Vampire, I'm sort of vaguely aware of like the shape of the story. Like I couldn't probably tell you much of the specifics of it because I haven't seen that movie in many, many years. But I like the changes that they made to this more modern day one. So in the original, I believe that the Louis character was played by Brad Pitt. So obviously the actor in this one is a little bit different, and they get to kind of bring in sort of this New Orleans, like they get to bring in like the sort of the racial dynamics of the time period and of it, like sort of his unique position, which is that they're like a very rich family, but it sort of has to be like underworld rich because of the racism at the time. And I haven't read the book, but I'm pretty sure none of that kind of flavor is in the book. And I liked that they brought that in. I thought that was like a really cool addition to the to the lore if you're going to update it for like a 2021 2022 or whatever whenever this actually came out. I don't remember time period. I think it like is a nice addition to kind of make the cast a little bit more diverse than it was in the 90s when it was Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise.
It almost feels like they did it such a good job at that story that I can't imagine the story out without the race commentary. So I wouldn't even know what I feel like that's such a big part of the story, at least in this pilot.
Me neither.
It is.
And I think that's like one of the benefits, like maybe of us not knowing the source material. Because I mean, like, let's think about it. How many times have we watched a show where we knew something about it? We knew something about the source material. We knew something about the characters, the setting, and stuff. So it's fun for me to have no idea about what it should have been. So like when I'm looking online for reviews and stuff, and I'm looking up stuff about the first episode, apparently they did not, like Louis Despont de Lac, which all these names, they're a lot for me.
Yeah, they are.
They were the owners of an indigo plantation. So dramatically different. And I find it really interesting that, just like you said, Kat, we got into this world and you don't even realize that it's false or like not the source material. It feels so well put together, I guess. Ooh,
I don't disagree.
I almost needed to sneeze and then I didn't.
Oh no.
It was gonna hit me.
Oh yeah, I just looked up the same thing and it's all about the indigo. Yeah, that's a very different backstory, I guess, in the book and maybe the movie than the TV show. And I think that even if it's the same general outline, I think adding that sort of layer to the character honestly makes it more interesting.
Kat, what about you? What were your kind of overall thoughts on the first episode?
I like the interview aspect, honestly. I thought that was kind of the most interesting because everything else, I think we've seen elements of vampire stories before. Again, I think the race story is probably the most different because I can't think of a black vampire story in the is it the 1900s? What year is it?
1910.
Oh, 1910.
I was 1900s. I can't think of any. I can think of like Blade, who's like a vampire hunter, but there's not a ton of like black vampires. So I was like, oh, that's something different. But the lore of vampires is pretty similar to what we've seen of the lore of vampires before. Yeah. But the interview aspect, I'm like, oh, that's something I've literally never seen before. The idea of this kind of regular guy who's obviously gone through stuff. They've definitely stated that in this episode, and him trying to be this like outside source to interview this person who's been alive for over 100 years. But then you could kind of tell it's going to get messy. And I like that about the pilot, where it's just like, will he get too close to his interviewee? What's that going to look like? And I like that as a structure. And, we talked about Sopranos in the past. We did a pilot pod about it. But one of the elements that I like about Sopranos is the idea that Tony Soprano is able to be interviewed by his therapist, and you get to see something different from him or the mob story. And I feel like with this, that also brought something new and different and a different layer. And I like the modern stuff a little bit more. So
it's really interesting because this is one of those shows where I watch it and go, I'm really intrigued. I'm going to keep watching it. I don't like a single character. Like, I don't actually like any of the characters. None of the characters
but they're intriguing. Likable. Yeah. I agree with that.
But they're intriguing. So, like, Daniel Malloy, the journalist, right off the bat, we're like, this guy, he's just kind of annoying. But they do a really good job of giving you his character very quickly with the reality that he has, retrospectively, very small amount of screen time. They give you all the history you need on him. Louis and Lestat. Oh gosh, I'm gonna say this wrong.
Lestat, I believe.
Is it? I think it. Yeah. So it's Lestat, and I think he pronounces it Lestat. Like, I don't think you do the T at the end.
Oh, probably. You probably don't.
Lestat.
I feel like I always pronounce it like Lestat, but the T at the end is probably not necessary.
Yeah, I think it's Lestat de Liancourt. I'm trying to say it in a French accent, which actually was a little distracting for me. It was the French accent was a little much for me because I don't know about you guys, but right off the bat, Vampire guy sticks out like a sore thumb. I'm like, does nobody notice that this guy just looks wrong? He looks like a time traveler who's in the wrong time. Like everything about him, the way he walks, the way he moves, the way he looks, like all of it just makes him stick out right away, which is really intriguing to me because his accent, all of that, like looking at it from a creative perspective, that is the point. You as the audience should immediately be like, this guy's wrong. This is not right. Even if no one else in New Orleans knows this guy's wrong. And I really liked how obvious that was. Not just because his eyes were blue and he had massive pupils and he was dressed weird and he talked funny, but like he was just so out of place and it grated me. Like there was something about it that was just like you kind of, it felt a little bit like nails on a chalkboard a bit. Like he just didn't fit in, which I really enjoy how they made that happen, especially because in a book, she's going to be able to describe that sensation. She's going to be able to describe how this character feels like he's out of place or he's in the wrong time or he just doesn't fit in. But in this case, they were able to very successfully, in my opinion, make Lestat just completely unworldly and otherworldly. Like I was really impressed with the way that they were able to pull that off, even if I still don't like the character at all.
I think the way he used his power was really interesting too. Because again, you're saying like in the book, it'd be very obvious to be like, oh, he's like trying to tempt him. And there is this idea, obviously, like they talk about the main character's sexuality. Like, no, I figured out I was queer, but it almost feels like that he's tempting him. Like he doesn't actually like this person, but because he's using his powers to manipulate him, that's why he likes him and is infatuated with him so much. And I thought that was interesting because I feel like that plays a huge part in this whole episode.
Yeah, I think there's like a forbidden fruit aspect of their relationship where he understands kind of like that he shouldn't be doing this for like societal reasons, but also I feel like part of him knows he shouldn't be doing this because this guy's weird, but like he finds himself drawn to him and I think there is like a question of like how much is he just organically drawn to this guy because like he's attracted to him and how much is it Lestat or using his vampire wiles basically on him because it does seem like there's a version of his vampire powers has to do with like magnetism or which is a very
100%.
very common like vampire trope is that they're like hard to resist. So I think there is a question of like how much of this is like compulsion from him and how much of it is from Louis like actually being attracted or like intrigued by this guy.
And I think there's also something to be said too about the fact that like the Louis does not feel like he fits in and Lestat totally grabs all of those bits. Like the end where he's telling him all of the reasons why he should join him in Vampire World. Louis like, yeah, these are actually all pretty solid reasons. But part of me also thinks it's a bit of a honeymoon phase when somebody who is just discovering, oh, I actually find myself attracted to a male. Like I am attracted to this individual and he's like, "Oh, he's got kind of that honeymoon dating phase where you're like, "Oh, this is really fun. I'm enjoying this now." So I think he's definitely honeymooning a little bit or pink clouding. That's the word I'm looking for. Where everything is going great now and then it's gonna go downhill. But yeah, I think there's definitely some compulsion going on there. And there's also like that common vampire trope where after they get bit so that they don't feel pain and so that they don't freak out, it usually comes with like a massive amount of physical desire. Like whoever gets bit usually has like feels like wonderful in all the sexy books that you read. Getting bit by a vampire almost always causes you to have an orgasm. So you know what? That's I've read a lot of smutty books, okay? This is a common
Amy's
thing.
like, listen, I know.
From all my experiences with vampires. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting to see kind of this vampire lore. Kat, do you have any thoughts about the way that they sort of have built up this vampire world?
I mean, I like that it wasn't so obvious. I like that it was pretty organic. Again, I think even the compulsion is like, oh, okay, like it's obviously there, but it's also not. Trying to think if they really show they when they're having sex, we do see him bite him, I think, right?
Don't they
Yes,
float?
yes.
Or they do
And then they
float.
float.
The
And
float.
But that's the first
he also
time you
puts
see
Louis
it
to
though.
sleep. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked
So he
how
compulses her
gradual
to
it
go to sleep.
was.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting that the queer story for supposedly that's the only thing I looked up is that I think in the books it was subtext. Like it was very like obvious it's happening, but they don't really play it out. But this they're like, we're gonna show you,
Yeah.
and that's gonna be a big part of the story, which that's what I like about adaptations. Do something that the original book
Yeah.
they couldn't do. Do something
Yeah.
different. And again, I've never read the book, so I don't know if like people are like it was unfaithful, but I would hope most people are like, it's cool that we finally got to see it.
I feel like the movie, I haven't read the book, but I feel like the movie I feel like there was subtext, but it was like again, it was Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise in the 90s, so it wasn't gonna get very gay. But I do
Who
feel like
was the audience? Like, what was the target audience of that movie? Was it just women? Like, well,
I
yeah,
think
was
it
it
was
gay men?
Fans.
I think it was kind of everybody. Anne Rice was pretty big at the time. I feel like these books were pretty popular, and also it had like two of the hottest stars of that sort of time
Yeah.
period. So like I feel like anybody would have just gone to see it just for them because this was like 1994. I had to look up the date. So it was like Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise were really popular back then. So it was like two of the biggest male stars. And then I think there is a girl who was also in it, and now I'm gonna
Kirsten
blank on
Dunst.
Kristen Dunst. That's right. And it was like little Kristen
Oh,
Dunst.
and
I think it was
Antonio
her.
Banderas is in
Yes,
this.
it was like
Man.
the cast in the original movie is very stacked, but it wasn't, I think one of the fun things about doing a modern day telling of this story is that you can be a little more explicit with things that were maybe not as explicit back in like the 70s when she wrote it or the 90s when they did a movie about it. Like you can
Yeah.
if there was subtext about, these two men being really into each other and I'm going to make you a vampire and you can be my good pal forever. Now in like 2022 you can be like, no, they're just gay. They
Yeah.
They
really
also
like each
do.
other.
They also do a good job. And again, don't know if the movie goes back to modern times or not. And Morgan, you could answer that if it's like two timelines. But I'm curious to see what the other vampire is up to because, like, we saw
Yes.
our main guy, but like, yeah, what's he up to in the
What's
modern
Lestat
age?
doing?
Yeah.
And there has to if I may, I'm gonna throw a little predictions here. I don't think he's still around or he
Ooh.
has become an adversary, like a major adversary.
I can see that because I feel like they would
I
still be
think
together if they weren't enemies.
That's also my guess, and
Ah!
that is based off of nothing because truly barely remember the movie. But yeah, I feel like there was probably some sort of falling out if he's still
Yeah.
alive.
And I'm thinking about like Morgan and I have listened to Impact Winter, and so there's different types of vampires in Impact
Oh
Winter.
yeah.
There's vampires who just happen to become vampires, and there's vampires who were initially evil people that were turned. So what's the difference between someone who you would consider to be a bad person or an evil person being turned into a vampire versus someone who is generally good being turned into a vampire? You're going to get two very different types of vampires. And so I gotta tell you, this Lestat guy, he does not seem like a good guy. He's like, I'm gonna just punch this priest through the head. And it's gonna be on YouTube and it's gonna be fine. It was like, how is this on YouTube? I thought about that multiple times when we were watching this. But I think he's like, I like how very clear they made it that he is a monster. And yes, Louis has I think Louis has had to step into the role of being kind of a hard ass and being kind of a rough and tumble kind of guy. And maybe, yes, he has suppressed those violent urges for a while. And now that he's a vampire, he's like, I can embrace the violence. But I think deep down, he does care for people. And if given the opportunity, would care for people more. But what
I mean, even
happens
when that
when you're
guy
turned into something?
dies, Like the guy
his brother,
dies, he
yeah.
throws himself. Yeah, his brother. Like you could tell he
His
cared
brother,
a lot
yeah.
about his brother, so he like
Yeah.
has feelings for people. He has emotions.
Yeah. Whereas the
And
other guy
his
was like,
sister
I'm gonna accost
too.
you at the funeral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Oh
then,
yeah.
and so I mean,
So
he lost a lot too, which was interesting because we got to see that origin story for him.
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I
think
kind of
there's
want to see.
also
Go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say there also might be one of those things where it's like the longer you're a vampire, the more you start to like lose your humanity. So we're
Mhm.
seeing Louis at the beginning of his journey, whereas Lestat, who knows how long he's been a vampire, but it seems if that's the theory, a long time because he
Yeah.
doesn't care about anything. He's punching priests through the head. He's killing people. He's doing what he wants. He's sending a you up text at a basically a funeral
With his brain.
with his brain.
You up? That's so funny.
Hey.
And he's like, he's got this almost misguided belief that he is killing people who don't have lives worth living. Which, what an interesting choice, because he literally multiple times he mentions how interesting of a choice it is that he chose to come to New Orleans and to stop in New Orleans, and how interesting for him to say, I'm choosing this town that basically has a bunch of people with no lives worth living, specifically like all these. But it is interesting because he chooses like one of them's Lily, who was one of the working girls, and then he just chooses a random lamplighter, probably a poorer person, and then he kills two of the priests. So he has a very interesting idea of lives that are not worth living.
Well,
But
also something
I
that's
kind of
interesting is I was gonna say, going back to because I was like, how long are you gonna stay in New Orleans? Is that gonna be like the bigger backdrop? But interestingly enough, our main character, we do get to see where he's gonna end up because we see that he's a pimp. Because I'm guessing that's something they're building up to. That that wasn't something in the opening scene. I think isn't it, maybe I read it wrong. Wasn't there a scene, our main character, where maybe it's a different character, but they're like, oh, I'm a pimp. But didn't that happen?
the main
Oh,
character is a pimp in the
in the 20s
1910s.
or the
No,
1910s, yeah.
I thought that was like he's
No.
a pimp in the beginning too.
No, no,
No,
it's like
okay, that's what I'm saying. So
it
he's
was
building up to being a pimp, and that's in New Orleans, right?
Yes,
yeah,
in the
that's sort of
past in New Orleans.
the voiceover of the past. So like when he
The
was sort
build
of
up.
like the master of the underworld when in his human life, one of the things that he ran was basically brothels where like working girls like, Saul to Johns and stuff like that. So he was a pimp back in the beginning of sort of his story, but like once he becomes a vampire, we have to assume he's maybe not
That all
still trying to
changes.
run his businesses. I don't know. Maybe he
I
is.
thought
Maybe
he
he's like,
would because
well, I'm
he'd
a
have more
vampire
power.
businessman now. Yeah,
Well, that's what
that's
I
true.
thought would happen is that he would get even more power. Because again, we were talking about like people who do not have power within New Orleans. I'd be curious to see if that's a through line for even more story. Now he might be more powerful because of that. Because if
Well,
you're a pimp, you kind of have power.
yeah, but then you're also like you have to be you're not as discreet as you think you are. Like right now he's hiding out in the United Arab Emirates. And is that how you say that?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Emirates.
Oh, oh wow, we're so bad. I think that's it because like he's hiding out in Dubai basically. Because that is the place where he has the most discretion, and he's just. It did sound like based on the interview part at the start, like before the actual interview, that maybe he's not able to hide as effectively as he used to be able to. Which is a little impact wintery, where like what happens when something major happens globally and suddenly the characters or the types of people or the supernatural creatures that used to be very well hidden now come to,
And do
Yeah.
people know that vampires
intended.
exist too? Because I'm guessing he's interviewing this person because they know
Yeah.
vampires exist.
So my impression was no, that like
Yeah.
he is hiding out in a place where he can kind of go under the radar. At one point, the journalist character asks him like, "How much does it cost to kind of live this lifestyle without like pinging anybody's radar?" And he's like, "It costs a lot of money because he's got these windows that lets the
The
light in."
coffin.
Yeah, yeah, his coffin, as so to speak, where he's got these windows that like let filtered light in so he can see it's daylight. But then when he has the filter come up and puts his arm in, you see the daylight still burns him. So he's obviously tricked out this huge like apartment condo, I don't know, building to be his own like special vampire pad, which would require a lot of money.
Morgan, sidebar here for a second. You used to work for a shades company, and
I did.
When those came up, because I did some of the voiceovers for
Were you thinking
Morgan's
about the
company's
motorized
videos.
shades?
I sure was. I literally was like, God damn it. This is like I'm not going to say the company.
Ease and convenience of motorized
oh my
shades.
Gosh. I was like the number of times I talked about how you could attach your shades to your Alexa. Like,
yeah.
Oh man.
He didn't even have to. Did he talk to the shade? That would be funny if he did.
And this was an Amazon Prime show. He would have.
Yeah.
He would have been like,
Alexa, roll up the shades.
So if anybody
me.
has that thing and we've just rolled up their shades, I'm so sorry. I feel like it's a small percentage.
I want to talk about New Orleans for a second here in this setting. Because as you know, if you've listened to a lot of our podcasts, I watch a lot of period stuff. I really like history. This was a new one for me.
Yeah.
With the exception of Disneyland, I have no semblance of New Orleans and the French Quarter or any of that.
I've
never
been
there.
to
I
New
would love
Orleans.
to go there.
Me too.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
I have a friend who is a reporter there. So we stayed with her for a little while, and we got like honestly, I feel like not history, but I feel like we got like a nice semblance of what modern New Orleans looks like. And honestly, it's really dangerous. But also she's a crime reporter, so maybe the source.
She's gonna have the inside track on most of the crimes. Yeah, I went I went a while, like I guess like 10 years ago now, on a vacation. And so we did like a ghost tour and stuff like that. We were going to see more of it, but then a hurricane came through and we didn't see much of it at all because we just got stuck in our Airbnb.
Wow.
The people who ran the Airbnb, they decided to go home and just kind of leave us in the Airbnb. So I was sure that the ghosts were going to kill us, and my friend was sure that like a person was going to kill us. So we were sort of worried about every scenario. But you know, we didn't get to see much of the sights and sounds of New Orleans because we were like drinking wine and playing card games, hoping to wait out the storm. We did
a different side of New Orleans.
The difference at the last day we did, I tried to pack all the alcohol I should have drank on the trip into one night. That was a mistake. But we did go to like one of the oldest bars in New Orleans, which is still like well, when we were there, it had like everything was by candlelight and they didn't have any electricity in it, and it was really cool actually. And the ghost tour was really cool. So I would love to go back to New Orleans because the architecture there is so beautiful, and like all the balconies on all the buildings and the wrought iron. It's like it's such a cool place. It looks so visually different than anywhere else.
The French Quarter is interesting. There's obviously great food. I think that's one thing I really wish I did more of because we were doing like a lot of local stuff. I feel like I had very much of a local experience, but I kind of want to do some of the touristy food.
You had to, the touristy stuff.
Yeah, I didn't really do. I don't think we really had like the baguettes or whatever.
You didn't have the beignets.
Beignet, there you go. No, we didn't. And baguette is French. We did not have the beignets because we were just doing again like local stuff. So I had more like shrimp and grits situation, which was fine, which is cool too.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, no, it was cool. I like going to a place and like seeing a very different view because again, I could go to New Orleans myself and do the touristy stuff.
Do all the tours,
to do like a local version of that, I thought was cool. But yeah, I've been to New Orleans, but I don't know much about the history of New Orleans besides like I would say a lot of from what I've noticed, a lot of people I met. There's a lot of transplants of New Orleans, but there's a lot of people that have been there for centuries. Their families just been there for a really long time.
Yeah.
It's either transplant from 5 years ago or centuries. There was no in between.
And that's that like that's that Creole sort of nature to New Orleans. Because after I watched this, I was like, I'm really interested in this. And that word, and I honestly, I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. Is it Creole or Creole?
I think it's
I think it's
Creole.
Creole.
I think
Yeah.
it's Creole as well. It just sounded weird when I said it out loud. I was like, let me double check this. So like the
What's really
Creole,
interesting about New Orleans is also that French influence is so it's just so sort of
yes.
pervasive there. It's like in a lot of different stuff, which is cool.
And it's
I would
the
wonder if
term
there's a
doesn't
Haitian
necessarily.
influence as well, because like when you think of like French, you
Yeah.
think about Haitian, honestly. So I wonder if there is an influence there as well.
And it's like the idea is that it's a combination of not just race but also race and location, and it refers to those people, like you said, Kat, who have been there forever. Like they were the people born in New Orleans. Those were the people who are part of this Creole sort of culture. And I think it's really interesting to see that in this show because it makes it even more clear that Lestat is an outsider, that he is coming in from the outside. He's not part of that family. He's not part of like the different traditions, the funeral traditions, fascinating, the wedding tradition. Do you guys know why they had the dollar bills clipped there on her wedding dress?
Um, no, I don't think I do. I'm trying to remember if
I
I went to a wedding one time where they did a thing with like money, like dollars, where you give the couple like dollars as like a thing, but I don't remember what tradition that comes from specifically.
I'm looking it up because I thought that was really interesting. Oh, Cajun wedding tradition.
There you
A
go.
Oh,
guest at a Cajun wedding must pin money on the bride's dress before he can dance with her. That's
oh,
fun.
cute.
That's
That's really
cool.
fun.
But I really liked that. I liked all the different world, and it's fun to, I've done a lot of historical fiction stuff. I've done a lot of Bridgertons recently. Done a lot of that kind of time period and
My
Regency
Lady
and Tudor
Jane.
time period and My Lady Jane's, where I know those worlds really well. It's kind of
Yeah.
nice to be in a world that feels different. It was a little obvious that it was a set, at least in the first episode. There was one point where I was like, that is the world's most obvious backdrop. I'm like, I can literally see the actual backdrop of the street. But it sounds like they filmed on not on location. Real and quiet. But they filmed in, oh, where did it go? Where did it go? They filmed in, hold on. Oh my god, how many tabs do I have open?
Filming locations, let's say. Uh,
A
They
side
filmed
note, I
in
love that
Czech
as someone
Republic.
who has a puppy now, you could just tell Rowan quiet and he will quiet. I don't know what the trick with that is. But I'll
it
say, Lenny, shut up. And she won't.
and she's like, "I don't care." It does look like it was some of it was filmed in New Orleans.
Really? Was the first episode?
I don't know about the first episode. That's a great question. I don't know about the
The
first
first episode
episode.
felt very piloty. I'm like,
Oh,
this
you know
the
what? Maybe I'm
curves are
looking at
not high
I might be looking
enough.
at the film. Like maybe look up
Oh,
TV.
that's funny.
The problem is was filmed in New Orleans, Louisiana, and Prague, apparently in Chechnya or Czechia. Uh, but it looks like there was a quite a bit that was filmed in New Orleans. So
That's pretty
Okay.
cool.
so maybe some of the like the big places that they go to. It says key locations included Gallier Hall, a theater, Pirates Alley, an old convent. So it looks like they went to some of the places that they have on the
Prague.
show. They actually filmed on location.
I Prague is a like pipe dream filming location for me. If I ever go farther with my acting, I want to film in Prague. And it has nothing to do with the fact that one of my favorite TV shows filmed a lot of their final season in Prague. 12 Monkeys
Oh,
was filmed a
nice.
couple of episodes on location in Prague, but it's gorgeous. I literally, it was really slow at my job the other day. And so we were like Google Earthing places we wanted to visit, and we Google Earthed all of Prague. We had so much fun, but like it's just got this absolutely stunning architecture that I've never actually seen in real life.
It looks so beautiful. Yeah,
I
I've
want to go
never been
visit
to
so
Prague, but
bad.
it's definitely on my list too.
But I guess it's like great for filming this kind of stuff because of the architecture.
Yeah, because I feel like a
Okay,
lot of the architecture is kind of unchanged, so you can do like historical fiction stuff there and not have to
very
like build
easily.
a whole bunch of stuff yourself.
Okay, let's see. We have talked about the setting. We've talked about the characters. We've talked about our overall thoughts, the world building, the vampire lore. Are you guys gonna keep watching when it comes out on Netflix?
I don't
Well,
think it's
so
a show. Yeah, go on, Morgan.
I was gonna say, so I kind of have, and it did make me go like, why didn't
Finish.
I make the end of the first season? Like, what's wrong with me? So I'm wondering if like maybe when it comes on to Netflix, if I finally like bang out. Also, it's a 7 episode first season, I believe.
Not bad.
I
How did
watched
you not
four,
finish?
I watched 4. I was 3 episodes from the end, so I feel like I can definitely at least finish season 1. And I feel like I've
Yeah.
heard good things about season 2 as well. So it's like maybe when I get to the end of season 1, I'll be like, let's go.
Yeah, I like, we always talk about like the Bridgertons and things like that, and I'm always like, record those episodes when I'm not here. But I think this is the most I'm going to like a show like this. I think it had
Yeah.
just the right amount of modern. It was a really well done pilot. The characters are interesting. There's a lot of intrigue, but in the long run, this is still not a type of show that I particularly would watch my free time, because I'm not a huge fan of period pieces. But I think this is the closest you've ever gotten for me to watch a period. Enjoy it.
Nice.
I think I'm gonna give it another few episodes because
Ooh.
with my schedule and the way that I like to absorb television, at least for like right now, is I don't want to watch a show where I don't like the characters. And again, they're intriguing, they're fascinating, they're interesting. But I was never the kind of person who liked Orange is the New Black or Breaking Bad because those characters didn't connect with me. I'm like, I appreciate these characters. I understand logically from a
But you
creative
want like a
perspective.
likable part.
But
Yeah.
I want at least one likable character because for me, television, especially right now, is
You
a
should have
stage
waited
show.
for Tasty for Orange New Black, because I think
Oh, Tasty's so great.
I will say she does
But
something that's questionable, but she's a very likable character. Because I was trying to think, is
but
there
that's
likable
like
characters
what,
in
one
Orange
out
New
of
Black? And I'm
9?
like, oh,
It's certainly not Piper.
yeah. I would say the thing
Yeah.
is with Orange New Black, the main characters kind of suck. But there's like Puse
Yeah.
and Tasty that like make you want to continue to watch. But then they do
Yeah.
things to them that might not, be
Yeah,
great for
that
those
that show
characters.
that show is like a little up and down, but yeah,
Yeah.
I had a similar thing when I was watching the first couple episodes of Succession. I was like, "Oh, like they're just
Oh,
all
yeah.
horrible. Oh, they're just all
Yeah.
horrible people. Okay, so I'm gonna stop trying to empathize with anyone."
Yeah. Which is fascinating and it's fun. And that's an interesting concept point is you can really enjoy a show even if you don't like the characters, even if you find the characters repulsive. There's very little endearing about any of these characters, but you can still be, as you put, Kat, intrigued by them. The question is whether or not that is enough for me at this point in my life for me to keep watching the show, or is that something where I sit there and go, okay, if I was someone who um really wanted to dig into those kind of characters, if I was somebody who's watching this for a specific purpose, like, are these the kind of characters that I would enjoy? And there are people who like this. There are people who love those like morally gray characters, but I'm looking for some characters that I connect with and not necessarily identify with. They're vampires. I'm not going to be able to identify with them necessarily. But
Not
I think I'm
yet.
looking for the
You
characters where
can
I'm like,
become a
okay, I've
vampire.
actually
You could.
like enjoyed watching your character progression. It's like Game of Thrones. There are enough characters in Game of Thrones to overshadow the characters who the Joffreys, or the
Yes.
Littlefingers, where you're like, you give me the ick. And I think Gen Zers, they've created such a useful word for us. They have finally put into words the sensation we've all been feeling. And so I'll be honest, if I'm going to have to say it, most of the characters in this episode give me the ick, but
Mm.
not in a bad way. Like just in a, I don't know if I'm going to continue watching this, but I did go right to Netflix to see if episode 2 was available. So I'm going
Ooh.
to
There you
give
go.
it 2 more episodes, but I'm usually with something like this, I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it a little bit of time, and then I think I'm going to go back to my Star Trek.
It's
Nice.
interesting because I was I was watching this while I was doing work, and I got to watch it, and then I was behind on Abbott Elementary, and again, very different shows.
Yes.
And with the interview with the vampire, I was like, okay, like I was into it enough, and I was like, oh, I could see this is an intriguing show. But so I was losing some of the pieces sometimes. So I had to, like, rewind, be like, oh, okay, that's where that was going. But then Abbott, and again, maybe it's because I've just seen a lot of seasons and it's a very light show. I was able to work and fully understand what was going on, understand the characters, who was going, enjoy the characters. And again, it's a different type of show, but I found myself enjoying something more like that than your interview with the vampires, just because I don't mind characters that are rough around the edges. I enjoy those type of characters, but I do think you need a lighter foil. I do think you need a secondary character that is just a nicer character. Because I agree. Like, I think obviously as someone who hasn't watched Game of Thrones, but from what I was hearing, what you were saying with Game of Thrones, like, you could have the really evil characters, but you have to have, even if they're a supporting character, a little bit of a lighter character. I think The Boys is a really good example of that. They all really suck, but there's like little lights within where you're like, oh, they could be a good person, even though their world is shit. They're trying.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do
think-
I struggle with those kind of shows where, like, everybody is a terrible person. We almost finished Succession, and I ended up really liking that. But, like, The Boys, I think I exited after, like, season 2, and Mike and I started season 3, and then I was like, I think it's too much. It's too dark.
Time.
This one's too dark for me. Yeah, this one. So I think this one. I thought this was a really strong pilot, and I was, like, really, I was really interested in, like, everything. I really liked the way that they did the story building and the world building. I have, started to struggle with, like, the hour-long episodes recently. I just
Hour
wish
and 8 minutes without commercial. Like, the commercials were not
Girl,
part of it.
same.
Yeah.
Same.
It's like
Tired, man.
what if we went back to 45-minute episodes? Could we try those again? I think the subsequent episodes are shorter. But I did feel like there were points on this one where, despite thinking it was really strong and very good, I did feel the length a bit. I was like,
Because I didn't sign up for a movie. Like, if I signed up for a movie, I would sit down for a movie, And
yeah,
honestly, a reason why a movie can be 3 hours long, because it's the beginning, middle, and end. You don't need to watch more of it.
it's
So
true.
when it's a TV show and it's 2 hours long, you're like, that's not what I signed up for.
When you see the 4-hour long Stranger Things episodes, and you're like, no, please.
I know it's coming.
It's gonna come. All those episodes are gonna be 5 hours long so that they don't have to pay the actors for additional episodes.
Which is exactly what they're doing.
Exactly.
It's interesting because I think I was telling you guys about this movie. I Used to Be Funny. That's like a really dark movie, but I think they do a really good job at, like, grounding it and making the characters likable. But it's interesting, in a movie, I can almost watch something that's a bit darker. Because again, I'm in and I'm out. With the TV show, you're like, well, I got to invest years possibly to this. I don't know if I want to be here for years, investing in this really dark thing. And again, I don't mean that shows can't be dark. I want them to be dark. I don't like things that are too light, but it's just the constant bogging of it is not fun. There has to be something that breaks it up.
I think one of the nice things about this show, or at least, like, my understanding of what this show kind of becomes, is that the premise of the sort of the novels is that it moves through time, and it kind of follow as the it kind of follows the characters through their lives, and obviously there are long lives. So it does feel like it could lend itself to maybe, like, lighter episodes or lighter seasons as we move through the timeline of these characters. I'm not saying that's necessarily what's going to happen, but it does feel like you can get, like, a change of pace and a change of setting because you're moving through time, because these characters are so old. I don't think the whole season takes place in, like, 1910s New Orleans. I think it does it jumps a little bit through the story.
I think the other challenge that it's going to have for me is, what about this plot is going to make me want to come back? Because how many times have we seen a vampire who was bit and now he has to learn how to be a
That's
vampire?
true. There was a cliffhanger that shows you a plot. It's just him becoming a vampire.
Yeah, it's like
it was an
now he's a
origin
vampire.
story. And I looked up like a brief review of the second episode, and it's like, wow, and now he has to learn how to like get rid of his humanity because he has to kill to survive. And I'm like, we've done this before.
That is sort of the double-edged sword of vampire lore, is that
yeah,
because vampires got so popular at one point, it does kind of feel like you've seen every variation of vampire stuff. So it's like watching a Spider-Man origin story over and over and over again. You're like, Uncle Ben's not gonna make it. Like, the vampire has to learn to survive as a vampire and stuff like that. So it's like, and we're gonna hit some familiar beats.
Yeah, that's why I liked Impact Winter so much. I thought it was a really clever take on vampires. If you guys haven't, Morgan and I have mentioned it a few times, literally because we were talking about recording an episode about season 3. Impact Winter is an audio drama on Audible by Travis Beacham, who was the creator of Carnival Row. So we listened to the first 2 seasons, and we've done a review of season 1 and season 2. So if you're interested, we're going to listen to season 3 and then review season 3 coming up here in the next few weeks. Anywho, do you guys have anything else you want to share about this? Overall, I think it was a really well done pilot. To me, it sounds like it would be a very effective mini-series. I don't know if it's going to successfully get me to come back for 2
I thought you're going to be successful
seasons.
for 3 seasons. I'm like, well, they already passed that. But
to be fair, all the seasons are pretty short. I think the first season 1 is like 7 episodes. I think season 2 is like 8. So it like each season feels a little like lengthwise feels like it's a mini series, but I mean that's kind of all TV right now. So I don't know if that's Interview with the Vampire specific. Everything's just so short now.
Especially AMC. I want to say Killing Eve was on AMC, but maybe it wasn't.
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was.
That was short. That was like 5 episodes a season.
That's like a British show. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think it was made in a half British production.
That makes sense.
I think that helps though.
The British shows where they do like 2 episodes every 3 years. Like I guess the word like the Netflix model is like that now.
Good for them. Give me 2 episodes of a show.
Exactly. I can commit to 2.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's gonna wrap up this episode. Do you guys have anything else you want to share about the episode, the first interview with the vampire?
Oh, I will say it's a nice looking show. Like visually, it's a good looking show. Like they obviously took their time. Costumes are great. Like the setting, like the New Orleans setting is really cool. Like it's a sharp looking, music's good. Yeah, it's a sharp show. It's a good pilot.
Yeah.
And that's all I had to add.
Sorry. Morgan's covering for me. Those of you who are watching on the video, but on audio, I just had the world's longest yawn that I could not stop.
Couldn't get out of.
We're all a little sleepy tonight. So
we're all a little sleepy tonight. So we're going to start wrapping things up. So first off, Morgan, where can everybody find you online?
Sure, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Mojotastic. You can also find me as a co-host on Supergirl Radio, where we just finished reviewing my adventures with Superman season 2, which actually had Supergirl in it, which was really fun. And I think we're going to do the last Crisis animated movie pretty soon. The first 2 were pretty incomprehensible to me. So we'll see if the third one really lands this plane. I'm excited.
They have a third one. There's usually part 1, part 2, but they're like, give us a part 3.
They're like, with this bad boy's got to be a trilogy, and did it? We'll find out. How about you, Kat?
I have a Kickstarter, Mob Princess issue 1. It's what we're kind of talking about, like 6 Feet Under comedy, but introspective like Sopranos. So if you like these highbrow television shows like Interview with the Vampire, you might like this one. It's about a girl who finds out her dad's a mob boss. He dies, and she has to take over his dynasty. So check it out. It's a fun book. And follow me at Comic Uno. That's the best place to find me.
And then you guys can find me on Instagram, Amy_HYP. I am currently taking a break from theater, but thank you to, we had a lot of people, some who listen to the podcast and some others come to see me in the show. I was going to share, one of our listeners came to.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
Much Ado About Nothing. Hold on. Hold. Let me find.
I'm ready for the share.
Here, you guys talk for a second.
I was gonna
I
say,
have to find
in
it.
the interim, we actually did get a comment about
Oh, great.
Our Batman episode, which we Batman Caped Crusader, which we were pretty medium on, at on Twitter, on YouTube at Stanley Joe said, "Love the enthusiastic critique, but I do think the show was decent, just not very deep or unique. I think further seasons will get deeper and more interesting." So thank you. I don't disagree with any of that. I do think that it is a decent show. It just kind of was a little bit middle of the road. I'm hoping that further seasons get a little bit more interesting. We all tried. We all were surprised by how much we didn't end up liking that.
And I think, what you were saying earlier too, I think in that episode, like Harley Quinn had an okay first season, but it definitely got better as the show went on. So,
I agree. Like season
We're
2 of
hoping
Harley
for
Quinn
hope.
was so much better,
Mhm.
than season 1.
So the listener who came was Ellie, and Ellie sent me a really sweet message right before right before the show started on July 18th, and said, "Hello, legendary lady. I'm a longtime listener of the pod, and this is my first time writing in anything as a fan. So I'm excited to be going to your performance tonight and getting a chance to see you as Beatrice." And then she wrote, "May Bebos might be with you tonight as the casting crew kick off opening night part 2, break a leg and stayed legendary." And then I freaked out a little bit in my reply. And afterwards I was like, how'd you like it? And they went, "I absolutely loved it. I've been a fan of the production since seeing Tennant and Tate's rendition in the early 2012s, and your whole
Whoa.
cast blew me away in the way they embodied each character, especially you and Josh's Benedict's comedic performance. The director and choreographer great on the blocking. I wish I could gift the pair of Benedict and Beatrice's bowls trampling across center stage into each other's prominent space, and the evening scenes that were well worth the hype in the podcast. Hysterical flower crown from the fountain, which was something that I did last minute, and I just freaking loved it. And props to Josh for carrying that trellis all the way across the stage without looking like he was breaking a sweat. Without a doubt, a legendary show and a joy to see. Can't wait to hear your pod's thoughts on Lady Jane." And then later on, they said, because I asked, "Can I share this?" And they said, "I still can't believe I managed to see it with my wife because that 15 traffic had a lot of other ideas that day." And was really excited that they got to listen to the My Lady Jane episode. She says, "I really appreciated the spoiler warning for the whole season at the top of the show, and I'm excited to hear the rest of y'all's beaming thoughts on it."
Yay.
So,
I love that.
That's awesome.
That's really cool. Like,
That's
to have
so
someone
cool.
who's a podcast listener come to the show and be like, "Yo, it was awesome. We loved it. Like, we drove from Hesperia, and like, you were right. All the stuff you were talking about, like, I totally see it on the stage. Like, it was really cool, guys."
That's so
awesome.
cool. It's so cool. I'm so jealous of our listeners who get to go see your plays.
Actually go see it. Yeah.
We are very far away, and so we don't get to see them. I saw one, but I haven't seen
one.
I haven't seen any additional. So me
One of
and
these
our
days.
listener are one and one right now.
I really would love Morgan. Like, that production was great. I loved Sense and Sensibility. I would love for you guys to see me like in a Shakespeare thing.
Yes,
It's like
I would
such
love
my
to.
element.
I won't know what's going on, but I would like you to tell me what's going on after.
we can whisper things to Kat.
Yeah, Morgan will be there for you. And the goal with good Shakespeare is that you should still be able to follow it.
Yeah.
Especially the comedies. So we actually got some good feedback on that. I got like specific feedback that no matter what I was saying and when I was saying it, everybody could understand what I was saying.
That's
like,
awesome.
I had a couple of different
great.
audience members, some who were friends and some who were not, who were like, "You were so accessible. Like, I understood your character. Even if I didn't understand fully what you said, the intention behind what you said was obvious enough that I could follow along." So that was
awesome.
That's like really satisfying feedback for a Shakespearean actress to be like, okay, people understood me even if they didn't understand me. Like, that's really fun for me.
That's great.
But anywho, no shows right now, taking a break. But I will be in Chicago at the end of September for the it's a Creation Net con. It's a Star Trek con. So I'll get more details shortly. But for those of you in Chicago in the end of September, come say hello. I will be out there for the first time, and I'm so excited to visit Chicago.
Yeah.
It's a fun town.
I'm so excited. I cannot wait to try real pizza.
How dare you? How very dare you? How very dare you?
I will say
lots of sauce.
It does have a lot of sauce. It does, but I don't think that's real pizza.
It's too thick. That's not.
I love that. I love the toppings that you pick up the pizza and they slide off and you have to eat it with a fork. That's what I like.
That's
that is
wrong.
Pizza.
You'll have to take a picture and let us know. It should.
Gosh,
I still think
video of me trying
the pizza wars continue.
I have to find it. I do think we should have Amy have L&B. Maybe that would have been a better choice because I feel like that's like just sauce.
just sauce. You'll enjoy the sauce.
All right. So
time.
on that pizza conversation, I think we're going to wrap up here. Thank you guys so much for listening in. Remember, you can find us on patreon.com/thelegendaryladies. Twitter, legends_podcast. Email us, thelegendaryladies@gmail.com. We've started getting some emails. We love emails, so send us emails. Find us on Instagram, The Legendary Ladies. Tell us what you thought about Interview with the Vampire. Tell us if we need to stick around for more. We love hearing about how things are different from the source material. I'm not the kind of person that was going to be upset by those spoilers, so please tell me.
No, neither will I.
Did you like the changes? Did you not like the changes? Are we right in that these sort of unlikable characters can still be intriguing, but is it enough to keep us around? You let us know. So we'll go ahead and wrap up here and sign off for now. But for this week, thank you all so much for joining us, and stay legendary.